Welcome to the Way to Go podcast. Bill McMinn, Eric Barfell. We are talking about time and managing time today. So, you know what is interesting? There's a lot of verses like your time's in God's hands. Mm-hmm. Think about your time. We know 7 days a week, things like that. But there's not really a ton about time management in the Bible.
Right. No,
when you look at verses.
We'll probably say something about the sluggard, laziness.
I have that in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I have go to the ant.
Yeah.
Sluggard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do have that one in there. Absolutely.
No, it's not time management specifically.
Right.
But
two that I found that I think the ones I always think of, like if you talk to me about time, especially Ephesians 5:15-16, be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil, and really opportunity being time. And then the ESV, Colossians 4:5, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. So those are your two key verses. And Ephesians and Colossians, books like that, sometimes their verses are pretty parallel. You know, he's writing similar ideas to one church and then to another church. So that's your concept coming from Paul. Mm-hmm. Make the most of every opportunity / time. So to do that, to me, I think the first thing we're talking about is just prioritizing things. Like, how can you really make the most use of your time if you have no priority whatsoever?
Right. So you got to list out your top priorities.
Right.
And what has to get done versus what can get done later. What has to get done immediately, I should say.
Right.
Versus what can you do later. And then what can you do to work ahead.
Right. But even sometimes working later, does that work even need to be done? Is it a priority anyway? I mean, some of the things that we do or we get caught into, maybe we don't need to do because somebody else could do it. For instance, in leadership, they say 80% of your time should be going into basically what no one else can do. Only 20% of your time should be used doing what anyone could do. 80% of your time should be going into what just you can do. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you got to evaluate it. Is it really important for me to do this at all? Is this something, I've had sometimes people come, hey, what about this $100 expenditure? And I've said, that's not my decision. Like, that's not something I want to put any time into whatsoever. I don't even want to do it later on. I don't want to do it at all. So some of the things we could ask ourselves priority wise, is it even on the list?
Yeah, right. What do I have to get done versus what can I have somebody else?
Yeah. Well, there's a story, and I heard it a long time ago, and I read it actually. Have you ever heard that jar analogy where the professor comes, he brings the gallon wide mouth jar and he fills it full of rocks?
Oh, yeah.
And then he says, is it full?
Water and
is it full? And everyone says, yeah. And then he puts gravel in it and it goes down. He goes, is it full? Yeah. And then he puts sand. Is it full? Yeah. And then he puts water. And he was like, what is the point? And one kid said, stuff as much into your schedule as you can. He said, no, that's not the point. The point is, if you don't put the big things in first, they'll never fit. Like if you put the sand in first, you put the gravel in first, you'd never fit the rocks.
Right.
So he said the point of it was put the big things in first, then let everything else fill around that. And sometimes I fear that we're not really doing that. But what are some big things? Like if you were thinking of like, this is a big thing that I should be doing. That's an important thing.
Big things that I should be doing. I mean, I have I have a notebook where I list out all my stuff for the week, and throughout the week I'll cross stuff off. So it's always the youth group lesson. I have to do the lesson. I got to do my PowerPoint slides. FCA is a thing. Any meetings or appointments I have, like come Monday morning, and like the YouTube stuff that I do for the church. Like I'll list all that stuff out, and then any other stuff that I have to do and want to do that's not those big things, like any counseling appointment. So like young adult youth group Sunday night, young adults Monday night. I'm teaching financial peace to some guys on Tuesday night, and then I'll try to get to a band concert or a game or something. Like those are set times that I can't control.
Right.
So I have those listed out, and then I have all the work that needs to be done leading up to each one of those events, activities, groups, whatever it is. And then anything I want to do / have to do that's not one of those things, whether it's spend time just reading any sort of book that I want to be doing, I schedule in elsewhere around those big things. I'd call that like the gravel or the
I hear
sand,
what you're saying.
not the big rocks.
I think too, and generally speaking, not even the specifics of it, but just generally like a big thing would be family. Like if I don't make time for family, that's one of the things that all the little things could knock out of the way. So when I had my kids were growing up, there were certain nights that I wouldn't do anything but spend time with them. And Saturday was always theirs. Monday night was theirs. Friday night was theirs. Unless I had a wedding. Sometimes you had weddings and Friday night, Saturday, yeah, you were going to get pretty busy. I tried to do stuff with them Sunday afternoon. And
Right.
So there were certain blocks of time that I would try to make for them because that was important. But if I wasn't careful, then all the little voices and urgent voices could come in and knock them out of place, and I wouldn't be able to fit them in. I would say service, time for God, that kind of stuff, you know, would be definitely big stuff.
Yeah, no, I've always really stunk at time management. I've always been real bad with it. All my stuff would always get done. I'd make sure of that. But the time management, how I spent the time, horrendous.
Sprint at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It was all procrastination.
Right.
Or, I mean, I'd come home from school every day. I'd just sit at the kitchen table till 10:30 at night. Because if I had 8 hours to do homework, I would take the full 8 hours to do it.
Right.
Just sit there. I mean, the book would be open. I'd be staring outside. I'd be daydreaming. I'd get back to it here. It wasn't like structured time, scheduled breaks, things like that. It was terrible. And it's always been like that.
Right.
And so now I'm like really trying to, I mean, in recent years, I have like a list of stuff and I feel more accomplished if I check it off instead of like continually add to my list because that just gets more stressful. So if I list all the stuff I have to do and I cross it out as the week goes on, as the days go on, and it feels a lot more productive in that regard as well.
You have to sometimes, you know, even to me to pass a number on to you, I had to get to it right away or, you know, I wouldn't do it. And sometimes those little details, if you don't write them down, are easy to slip through. Hey, this guy has a question. This person has a question. This person has a question. I got to write that stuff down. And that definitely helps me.
Oh, worse is when they're like if they just tell me, I'll probably forget. But if someone texts me and I see it in writing and set up an appointment, hey, I'm going to come in for a meeting at 2:00. Oh, okay. But if they like text it to me and I have it written down, I can add it to my calendar on my phone, especially on Sundays. Cause I mean, that's the most convenient day where I'll see everybody, but if everybody talks to me on that one day, I'm going to remember like 2% of it.
Right.
So then they come in on Wednesday at 2:00 and I'm not here. They're like, hey, where are you? I'm like, where are you? What do you mean? They're like, hey, we're supposed to meet. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll be right. Like, I had absolutely no clue. Sadly, that's happened multiple times. You know, I had absolutely no idea.
I always tell people,
I can write it down?
Don't tell me today. Message me later. I said, anybody who tells me on a Sunday morning is asking me to forget. That's what you are now asking me to forget what you're saying by with you. Telling me on Sunday morning. But in 2 Corinthians 4:17-18, our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, what is unseen is eternal. And the one thing that I like about that, and I'm going to be preaching on this in part on Sunday morning, is the idea of focus and priority. Listen, your priority is not on the stuff that you see. And I think a lot of times we do get caught up in the things that are light and momentary troubles. Like seriously, it's not that big of a deal, but we can take an anthill in our mind and make it a mountain. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes we do because we're just, but is this something I really need to obsess about? Is this something I really need to focus on? Maybe not. You know, I can put my time over to here. So I think priority, even in the way that we think, even what we're giving our time to in our brains would probably be an important thing. What's really important for me to be thinking about, right? So that's something. And then the schedule too. I think schedule is important. Like when Jesus Christ, they were begging him, and this happened in Luke chapter 4, and he healed Peter's mother-in-law. And he's doing miracles, man. I mean, people were streaming and flocking to him, and they begged him to stay. But he said that I must proclaim the news of the kingdom of God to other towns also, because that's why I was sent. And he kept on preaching in the synagogues of Judea, and he kept moving around because he realized for him, his mission was not to stay localized there. He understood what he was supposed to be doing. He had to be at other places. I think sometimes as we're setting our schedule, you know, as part of our mission, well, what am I supposed to be accomplishing? And then when I know what I'm supposed to be accomplishing, I can rule other things out and say, no, I don't need to be doing that today because really my mission is this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, if you read through, I think it's the Gospel of Matthew, it's pretty evident. Jesus is always in between towns. He's always heading one place, and he's interrupted every time. A lot of his ministry is done on the road, and it's this implicit point of he's very interruptible in that sense. He's never too busy to talk to any one person and do a miracle with them,
right.
and stop and talk to them. And there's a book that I read a few years ago. It's called To Hell with the Hustle. It's all about how Americans today, it's exactly what you're saying about the student with the jar of gravel and everything. Like, oh, let's pack as much stuff into one day as we can. No, don't be so packed where you can't be interrupted and talk and do ministry with people and be interrupted. And I thought that was a really good point, because that's today's culture, so countercultural to
right.
today's mindset. I mean, even technology is like, the commercials kind of poke fun at it. It's like, oh, do more, do 2 things at once, do 3 things at once with this new phone and this new programming, whatever. Do more. It's like, no, that's
right.
not even the model that Jesus set for us.
No,
it's have a schedule that's set, but don't be so set that you can't even be interrupted
right.
to be with the people.
I think too is knowing what you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be scheduling. Because if you don't,
mm-hmm.
somebody else is going to schedule your time. Like, do more.
Mm-hmm.
And I will fit people in, like you said, because divine interruption is part of your schedule. Like, you have your best laid plans, but in his heart, a man plans his steps.
Mm-hmm.
But the Lord really determines that person's steps. So yeah, you might have a plan, but the Lord can change that plan. I have to be open. But I think part of that too is getting after it and getting
mm-hmm.
a good start on your day.
Yeah.
Like, if you actually get after it, start knocking stuff off instead of delaying and like, it's okay, I'm kind of piddling around with this. I mean, really hit it. You have more room for a delay, and it's not as stressful because you already got a ton done. So if you can get ahead, then you're more open for that.
Right. No, even yesterday, I had my my little itinerary listed out for the day, all the things I need to get done, things that are going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I don't account for the phone ringing. Well, 45 minutes later, my whole itinerary is, got to push everything back 45 minutes.
Right.
Only 30 minutes later, somebody comes in person. Okay, no, I'm happy to talk with them. 25 minutes later,
right.
Okay, I'll
exactly.
rewrite the itinerary.
I know. I hear what you're saying, yeah.
And that's not a problem, because like
right.
I have the time to do that and time to fit that in, but it's like, okay, that was just an oversight on my part. Like, I didn't account for the phone ringing. I didn't account for
Well, how many times do we get a funeral? I'm sitting in a staff meeting 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Well, at least I don't, and I just done a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
The night one Friday, I think it was, or Saturday. Yeah, Saturday funeral. Then the next Sunday I had a wedding. So that following Tuesday, so it's like the 13th of September. Oh man, at least I don't have a funeral this week. That afternoon, the phone rings. Right. So you're thinking,
that's how it goes.
How's this all going to fit? Because that is my mission. I mean, that is part of what I do, is funerals and give the gospel, places like that. So I just have to trust the Lord. I think in some of those interruptions, you just have to trust the Lord. God, you're going to help me to get the rest of this done. And it did. I mean, everything went fine, and I got it done. But when I first heard that, I'm like, what? And we're just starting your Wednesday night activities. You're starting coming to some of your Bible studies.
The most like stressful, one of the most stressful times of the year,
exactly, for sure. Because we're just starting to get used to the ramp up of everything that's going on, and it just wow. Anyway, I think
that's a good point, though. I want to go back to this. It's good to plan your time out, because if you don't, someone else will, or it will get planned for you. And then I think that leads to a lot of unhappiness in people's schedules and in people's lives, because they no longer feel like they are in any sort of control. They just have to go to all the events that are now on the calendar. Right. And they don't ever get to do anything they want. And I'm looking at all these posters of bottles, and I think people kind of bottle it up too. Right. It's like, oh, I've been in this marriage for 14 years, and like, I never get to do anything I want. We always have to do. Well, you got to plan, you got to communicate, you got to write this stuff down, and be on top of your stuff, like what you got to do what you need to do, communicate your plans of what you want to do, schedule your vacation and stuff probably in advance.
Right.
That way you actually get to go on a vacation, because next thing you know, 5 years go by and you're so miserable and unhappy because you haven't gotten
or you didn't
you didn't schedule breaks.
Yeah,
basically.
or you didn't get out west, or you didn't get to a certain place that you wanted to go.
Right.
But if you don't, sometimes and Gordon MacDonald wrote a book years ago, Ordering Your Private World, which is a great book.
I've read it.
And he would talk about that if you had a time commitment with your family and someone said, hey, on Friday night, I really need you to do this, but you had planned to take your family out to miniature golf or the movies or whatever it was, you could say, I already have plans. He said, you don't have to tell people what your plans are. You just say, I already have plans.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing, what are you going to say about that? Because your family's an important part of your plan too.
Right.
But if you don't plan time for your family, then you could get caught up in, I have nothing else scheduled. I have nothing else. And then pretty soon other people are setting your schedule for you. So
I was
that's why the
planning on
schedule's
doing
important.
nothing.
So I would, to me, you got to block off time. Block off time for fun. Block off time to work out. Block off time for working. Block off time, to get it done, right? I mean, sometimes you need to put your nose to the grindstone and just knock out a project around the house or get work done here, where I think too oftentimes we don't have that mentality of, I really need to get from here to here by this time. For me, I have to have certain word goals. So for the sermon, so that by this day, I want to be at this many words. By this day, I want to be at this many words. Now, sometimes what that means is I'm going to stay as late as it takes to get at those many words because I know where I have to be in order to make that a less stressful Thursday and Friday. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
That you're on top of it and not scrambling around. Like, I know how many words. It'll be almost as many words as I'm going to have on a Sunday morning by Wednesday. Then you have time to think through your illustrations. You have time to think through and reorder and reorganize it. Even now, I'm still going through and thinking through it. And the more time you have to think through it, the better off it's going to be, the better handle you're going to have of it. So to me, the blocking off the time and say, yeah, I know that I have this to do is super, super important. And I think a do list is important because then in the do list, when you do have, let's say if you get ahead, for me, if I get ahead on the sermon, I get ahead on podcasts or whatever it is, then I know what I have to do next. You won't waste as much time because you'll know, no, it's kind of like your budget of your money. Oh, I have X number of dollars in the bank. I can spend it. No, because that's for this bill. That's for this bill.
Exactly.
Because you have a budget, you budget your time too, so that no, this is not just free time. This person needs to be contacted. I still need to do this. This needs to get done. So you can just smoothly just keep on rolling.
Yeah, I hit this weird block in the month of September. It's like my stuff for early October is already done.
Good.
My stuff for like the next 3 days, somehow not yet. I don't know. It's like the super short term hasn't even touched it. The like medium stuff in a couple weeks, done. Long term, I mean, I'm kind of looking. I know what's coming.
Well, you're getting ready to fill in for me and preach.
Exactly.
So that's one thing.
That's one thing I've been thinking about that.
Right.
So, and with that, I got to like schedule some adults. I got to schedule my own leaders who can take over that Sunday and the Sunday before kind of thing. The wedding I have coming up already, that's been done for over a week. The counseling has already been done for over a week, 2 weeks now. This Sunday night's lesson, I don't know. It's like coming together, but it's not there yet. It's just like,
well, hey, we got some notes here.
Yeah, right. So sometimes I get caught up in like I work too far ahead or too much time. Again, time management is unbalanced because my time it's spent looking so far ahead. Oh yeah, those next few weeks hopefully will be a breeze. But it's like, okay, hold on. I've planned my next few steps, but I haven't even taken one right here that's right in front of me. So
youth group used to be fun. I taught it here for, I think, 11 years. I led youth group. And a lot of times I didn't spend a ton of time because I knew a lot at that point. And these kids are coming from broken homes. At one point, I had 25% of my youth group didn't live with either biological parent.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's how rough they were. There are some that were in that youth group that aren't even alive anymore. I mean, again, it was some of those kids were pretty rough.
Sure. And
so we would just go through times like, hey, we're going to read this chapter of John and we're going to talk about it first time. And then next week we do 2 John and we talk about it. They loved it. I was so amazed by like how hungry they were for that. Like they just really got into talking about the Bible and stuff like that. And the biggest talkative lesson I could ever do with kids was talking about parents. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
If you talk about parents, man, they're all of a sudden, even the quiet kids are chatting out because they all want to talk about how hard their life is.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, routines I think is important too. So you have your setting priorities, you have making a schedule. I think routines are hugely important, whether it's working out. For me, like I've already mentioned, sermon writing, spiritual routines. It's just, that's so vitally significant, because if I get out of a routine for working out, it's rough to get back in.
Absolutely.
A lot of times people, like, how come they haven't been out of church? Yeah, I haven't seen somebody for 3 months, 6 months. The good chance is they got out of the routine of coming, and they just haven't gotten back into blocking out that time and getting that. Routines save you a lot of time. When you get up, you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You have certain things you have to do on certain days. The routine of it, I think, is huge.
No, I've said it during COVID, an object at rest will stay at rest. An object in motion will stay in motion, kind of thing. It's like if you're in that habit, you'll just keep going. You don't have to be going fast. You don't have to be sprinting, but like just keep it going. Just keep it rolling. And I know we saw this come to fruition during COVID. People started staying home. And it took a long time to get them back, right? Because they got so used to just being at rest at that point. Oh, we haven't gone to church in weeks. We just sit here and were they watching it anymore? I don't know. But that exact thing played out.
Right.
The people, got out of the habit of coming every Sunday, and then starting up that habit took a little time.
Yeah, because
they
were used to, it's comfortable to be at home and watch. Or else, like you said, they may have gotten out of the pattern. I think for some people, just going out to gyms, going to a lot of places, it definitely changed your routines and your patterns. And once some patterns are changed, now sometimes the patterns don't need to be going back. Like I had certain restaurants I would go to, I don't go to now. It's just, I got knocked out of the routine with COVID restrictions and stuff. That's okay. I don't really, not too worried about that. But again, schedule your time, because I think that's hugely important. Make sure you know what your priority is. Get into routines, and you will be much better off. We appreciate you tuning in and listening to this podcast. Feel free to share it. Feel free to subscribe to the church page as well. You all have a great and a blessed week.